And since it's so 3 minutes till 11, actually it's been 3 minutes till 11 for probably months. But, so I recommend that you don't really watch that clock too much because you might get a little misled about where we are. Well, and speaking of misleading, I think that there's a fairly major glitch in the the booklet that explains what all of these are. So if you're looking for a Perkins-related workshop, this isn't it. But it will be great. So, well, at least good. Okay, acceptable. But anyway, if you can kind of look that over and see what's going on there. I didn't check that. I should have checked that. But this is actually a workshop or an explanation, a set of excuses, whatever, about an NSF project in computational thinking. So if you're interested in computational thinking, there's a handout. If you didn't get a handout, I'm going to put them over here. Copy. Would you like to be the handout? Okay. I'll take care of this one here. All right. Yeah, full audience involvement right there. Okay.
Anybody else for a handout?
Great. All right. Good job. I'm Gary Hartley from Folsom Lake College. I am the administrator of an NSF grant called a CPATH grant, which is part of CISC, the directorate within NSF. And our purpose in this grant, which is a 3-year grant for about $285,000, is to look at, yes? Sorry.
Should we hold applications till the end, or?
You can do whatever you want. This is very free-flowing. So if I say anything that you think is wrong, inept, whatever, just go ahead and go for it. Questions, comments, and snide remarks at all times are fine. Yeah. Just let me know ahead of time if you're going to do the snide remark thing. All right. The NSF has given us this grant to help us look at computational thinking and try to discover ways in which we can insert computational thinking into the educational system to help us to match up our output as an educational system within the community colleges and our partner Sac State. We're in the Sacramento area, by the way, in case some of you don't know that. And actually, Folsom, we're really known well for our prison. Okay. And when I accepted the job there, a lot of people said, "Well, why are you going to Folsom?" And I said, "Well, hey, there's a great prison there, haven't you heard?" And I said, "Well, why do you care about that?" And my response always is, "Well, you haven't met some of my relatives, because we all like to live in the same vicinity." We also refer to the prison as America's first gated community. So that gives you kind of an idea. We have to keep a little bit of a sense of humor about that. We're about 110 miles from here, so we are part of the MPICT associate school group, and I think there are upwards of 40 community colleges that are involved in it, so it's a rather large group. We feel very honored to be part of it, and our evaluator is Pete Safflin from Washington is here as well today, and we actually got his name from the folks here. So that was sort of a start for our partnership with MPICT. The purpose of our particular project is a little bit maybe different than some of the other projects that NSF has going, because there really wasn't anything to start off with. You folks that have CPATH projects and what I'm talking about, when you go on the web or you search the archives or you talk to people about a definition for computational thinking, it's a little bit hard to find it because there really isn't an accepted definition for computational thinking. There are a lot of ideas that are kind of in the works on that, but defining computational thinking turns out to be one of our very first jobs as part of this grant. And you can see already that the grant program has been archived. You know what archived means? Shelves, yeah. So we're finishing out this grant project, and some of the people that were in charge of the directorate when this RFP was written are now no longer there. So it remains to be seen what will happen with this. But we're forging ahead, and we've become very interested in this whole idea of computational thinking, partly because we had a grant that related to it, but partly because we have a number of people that are experts in the area of computer science, and they could not define computational thinking for us either. And in fact, one of our PIs did some really good work on computational thinking and has done some teaching moments. I'll show you some of those today. And his comment was, I'm really glad that we're doing this grant because I really couldn't have even defined computational thinking if you held a gun to my head before. So really, really interesting that someone with a PhD in computer science has really never wrestled with the idea of computational thinking. So I saw that as a big opportunity, and we've got a very committed group of people. I'm going to show you a little bit about that today, but just want to get started with a little bit of history. I agree with our keynote speaker today. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. This is our second CPAC grant. Our first one was a community building grant, and community building grants are about putting together a team. And this team of people are folks that you can call on, that are reliable, that are interested, that are engaged, that can bring resources with them. Typically not dollar resources, because NFS supplies most of that, but the resources in terms of, oh, we have a division that does that, let me talk to them and see what they can come up with. For example, Intel's Innovation Center has been real helpful to us. We have a large Intel facility in Folsom. It doesn't require people to stay there 24/7, but you think that because anytime you go by the parking lot, it's full. And this graphic up here shows our first poster presentation for that grant. And if you know much about NSF grants, they have a PI conference, Principal Investigative Conference. And at that conference, you're supposed to present a poster. And that kind of gives a little bit of an idea to the other people there what it is that you're working on, with the idea that we will collaborate together. And NSF likes nothing better than to know that its projects are collaborating. So that's another big advantage of being part of MPIT. So as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of MPIT. So anyway, this was our poster, and that's me right there, just so you know. It's legit. So starting off with the very initial idea, for us, it has to do with the pipeline. Everybody's heard about the STEM pipeline, right? Okay. Everybody's working on a STEM pipeline. Everybody understands the STEM pipeline. What we don't understand is why it keeps leaking. Okay? So we start off with the educational system moving along. Kids are, even pre-K kids, you think you can use your iPhone well? You know, give it to a 4-year-old. They'll have the whole thing figured out. They'll be buying apps and the whole bit pretty quick. But what happens as they go along is they get less and less interested in joining into the fray as part of industry later on. So we have this really great group of technology-interested kids that come into the pipeline, and then we somehow spoil it for them. And by the time we get here to coming out of the 4-year institution or even the community college, we have a significant drop-off. And what industry tells us is they're just startup people. So what's happening now? We're going out of the country to pick up folks that can come in and do that. I have a thing in my pocket. I just did it by accident. That wasn't magic or anything. Just let it go. So one of the things that we had an interest in is that there are changes going on the pre-K side. In other words, the input for this whole pipeline, big changes going on. A lot more interest in technology among young children. Okay, so that's something that's really interesting for us. And for me, because I'm a grandfather, and I've got my oldest granddaughter is in kindergarten now, and so forth. And, and she's just like a lot of other kids where technology is just an expectation for her. The other thing that was really interesting is this workforce thing, okay, the other end of the pipeline. Because something that's happening in industry is just the time you've got about $1 million, $1.5 million invested in somebody that's been part of your company for a long time, all that expertise goes golfing. Okay? All these early retirements and things like that. So there's all this institutional and intellectual equity that just takes off prematurely. So we are finding a lot of what was said today in the keynote and in all the talk that was done this morning about just not being able to kind of apprehend what's going on here and make sure that we're having an appropriate impact as the educational system. Everybody says the same thing to us that they're saying to them. Where are all these people that are supposedly graduating with computer science degrees? Where are all these people with their expertise? And the ones you give us don't know how to work. The ones you give us don't know how to show up. They don't know how to work in groups together. They don't know how to communicate with one another. They're not culturally sensitive whatsoever. They're great geeks, but you know what? They don't fit in our organization. So we actually have better luck if, in fact, one of the things that at Intel that they say is, sorry, I have to get back to you, I'm on the phone to India. You know, just because they have so much contact with the educational systems in India, they almost don't have time to talk to us. We're right down the street. So this is something that was real interesting for us. However, we decided that we would focus on this part of it because it's just a 3-year grant. But that's something that we're thinking about for the future that really needs some attention. What's going on at the beginning, what's going on at the end of the pipeline, as well as what's going on in the middle. So we think of ourselves kind of as swimmers, trying to figure out what the leaks are occurring. Okay, so any questions so far? That's all kind of the history basis thing. And this is really a tiptoe through the tulips compared with what we've all done. But just to give you the project goals real quick here so you get a little bit more idea. First of all, assemble a directive and advisory team. That's part of that community building thing. And you guys that have been involved in grants know that who you have on your team is everything. It is just everything. You have to have that commitment and longevity and you know, expertise is great, but you know, if people aren't going to show up, it doesn't matter what they know. Okay, so that's a big part of it. And then learning about computational thinking. There are a lot of different ways to do this, and I'd love to define computational thinking for you, but we aren't really even quite there yet. We have some working definitions, and basically we're looking at computational thinking as the process that computer scientists use to figure out what's computable. And this idea of what's computable has to do with what human beings are good at and do well, and what computers are good at and do well. And basically, the human being supplies the ideas and the problems that need to be solved, and kind of an idea about what needs to be done to gather data, and you know, those kinds of things. And then they step back from it and say, okay, there's a lot of work here. How do we get machines to do a lot of that work? And sort of bring our idea into something that is useful for us to make some conclusions and make decisions and so forth. So what computer scientists do then is, and I'm not a computer scientist, so if I'm stepping on anybody's stuff here, just remember I'm a psychologist, okay? So I can help you with that. But the idea is that you've got all of these decisions that have to be made about what kind of programming you're going to use, what kind of application you can use, what the limitations are, all of these kinds of things, and that is computational thinking. Now the idea is that computational thinking is something that is a good way of thinking no matter what kind of problem you're trying to solve. It doesn't even have to involve computers. But just realizing what you do with lots and lots of data. Well, you have to be organized. Okay? Are kids coming out of school very organized? They're having a big problem with that. So, even just one thing like that is valuable for computational thinking. So we start to look at all these things related to computational thinking. We'll talk about that in a minute here. I also gave you the handout. There's a list of computational thinking components or elements or concepts or whatever you want to say. And this is just one of many lists that are out there. Okay, this is not an authoritative list. It's sort of a working list that we play with. The next thing is to recruit teachers from all educational segments, because our goal here is to get computational thinking out there to the masses. Now, if computer scientists don't understand computational thinking as a concept, I mean, they obviously do computational thinking all the time, but if they don't understand it as a concept, then how do we expect fourth graders to understand it? How do we expect high schoolers to understand it? How do we expect community college students, my own, to understand it? Okay? Very difficult to do. And in my role as Dean of Instruction and Technology, I find myself with a lot of disciplines where we're trying to figure out, how do we make this relevant? How do we make it work? What are the components that we need? What's industry asking for? How can we match up our output with their needs? That sort of thing. Okay, so this is a great exercise for me. It really helps me out with that. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Plan and prepare CT modules. Okay, so things that people can present in the classroom. And the classroom could be any kind of classroom. It can be Intel U. Intel U is their own internal staff development type of thing, the way they in-service folks and so forth. They don't talk about computational thinking, but it's a key component. It's something they can use. And with a bunch of Intel people sitting around the table, they now have quite an interest in this because they understand computational thinking a little bit better. Then document the project progress, which is what Pete is helping us with. But we also thought that documentation we typically think of as lots and lots of sheets of paper. And we really didn't want to go there because that's not how we think, that's not how we work. So we have some kind of unique ways of doing that we'll talk about. And then disseminate project information, and that's one of the things that MPIC helps us with, because that's one of their key goals, is to disseminate the information. And as another NSF project, they've got a vested interest in doing that. So it's a really nice fit. Now, unlike some of the NSF projects that have been operating for a long period of time, we don't have a lot of output to share with people in terms of actual results. But we have done some kind of unique things. And this is what I'm going to call real-time activities, or it should have been entitled, "This is what we actually did." Okay, so I showed you the goals. This is what we actually did. First off, the two grants, we used both of them and just cherry-picked people that we thought were interested. We cherry-picked people that we thought would be reliable and helpful to us. We changed PIs from the first grant to the second one, because our first PI was just not really engaged. And when he was engaged in protecting computer science as a discipline from what he saw as a threat. Computational thinking as a threat. Okay? So that was just something that we had to look at and say, this guy's not really a fit for where we want to go with this. Some of those decisions are kind of hard, but being a dean, I know how to do that. I know how to fire people. But anyway, some of those were really good moves for us. Then some of the other things that we did, and I'll show you these just briefly. In education, we talk about strategic planning all the time. And you know how that works, right? You get together, you have this process, you develop a strategic plan, you put it in a binder, and no one looks at it until 6 years later when accreditation is, knocking at your door. That sort of thing, okay? But what our business partners said to us is, your strategic planning process is way too cumbersome. What you come out with at the end of the day is something that no one could really do anything about anyway, so it's appropriate that it stay in a binder somewhere. But we have a different way of going about that. And our way of going about that will actually work. We can do it in a few months with not a huge group of people, and we'll have things that we can actually act on. And how that works, I'm just going to show you the document real quick here, okay, is that there's a process where and some of you might have done this before. I'm having a little resolution issue here, so I'm going to have to manually pull this out, okay? All right. And basically what this does is it takes the end state. You're familiar with that phrase, begin with the end in mind, okay? This isn't that, okay? This is dream up the end in mind. You know, really go out on a limb and say, what do we really want to do, okay? And then some of these are really pie in the sky, or what I like to call CBS, think in the sky stuff, okay? And what you do is just get everything up on the wall. Just get everything up on the wall. And then you take each one of these end states and you pair up with a current state. And I know this is like iCharge type stuff up here, but I'd be glad to send you these if you want to see them. And the current state just describes where we are with that. And in some cases we said absolutely nowhere. This isn't even on our radar. But somehow it wound up being part of our end state. Okay? So then we compare the end state and the current state, and we identify gaps. Okay? And then the doable, achievable, actionable thing is that we put together gap closing actions. What we have to do to bring these two together to get to that end state. Is there a fourth column there? No, it's actually... That isn't even fully the third column. Got to go over a little bit more. All right, there we go. But the other fourth column that you could have over here, and that we actually have a listing in another place, is the stuff that we put here that we decide later on is below the line. Okay, so some of these sound like solving world hunger, and you know it's a 3-year grant, so give me a break. You know we're not going to be doing that. And we have a below-the-line list. So those are things that if we had a CPAP free or something like that, we would possibly go there. But it's great to get them up on the wall because it shows you what everybody's interested in and what their sort of dream is about how this all should go. How am I doing on time here? 10:53. Okay, so we developed this, and what I understand from the folks at NSF is that it's kind of rare for a project to go through a strategic planning process before they get started on actually, doing the work of the grant. And I think it's because in education, we've turned that into a multi-year project, which gives you stuff that you really can't do. The stuff over here you can do. And we make sure it's doable, it's actionable, to borrow Intel words. Yes, sir.
How does this match up against to the reasons you got the grant in the first place? It seems to me that there's someplace embedded in this. It has to be the fact that you got a grant for a particular set of reasons.
Yeah, and I'll answer that question more as a who question than a where question. As the administrator of the grant, and I'm about the only person that's not stopped to work on this thing. Okay, so that kind of helps you to understand a little bit. My role is just kind of outside of it a little bit. I have a facilitator. I don't facilitate the meetings. I have a work products manager, a guy from Intel, that came up with this whole process that we got engaged in. He sort of led us through that process and so forth. Now my role, I'm over here outside of it a little bit, but my role is to make sure that we don't get too far afield from that list of things that we said were going to be our criteria for this project. Okay, so if it gets off computational thinking out there into agriculture or something like that. It's me who says, well, everybody kind of need to redial this. So my facilitator and I and the project, or the work products manager and I and some other folks meet together as a steering committee and kind of evaluate that and make sure that where we need to go. And very often their question to me is this what NSF wants us to do? Okay, so I'm the guardian of that. Right. So it's more of a who answer than a where answer. Yes?
The PI, what's the role? You're not the PI.
I'm not the PI. I'm a psychologist, remember? We can't PI anything. We just keep the fights down between the people. No, actually, our PIs, one of them is a computer science and engineering instructor at my college, Folsom Lake College, which is part of the Las Vegas district. And the other one is a computer science professor from Sacramento State University. And he's the one that you'll see him in a minute here because he does our teaching moments and that kind of thing. But those guys our interpretation of what a PI does is to be the guardians of the pure discipline, to make sure that we're not wandering off into something and saying, well, CS is this and CS is that, and it really isn't. Okay, they're the ones that have to draw us back. But it was real interesting with this whole definitional piece that what we did was we decided we were going to hold a video teleconference with our program officer at NSF. She'd never had that happen before. She had to check with somebody to find out where the video teleconference room was and all of that. And we got, we were fully expecting, we're all sitting at a table here and we've got the background and we're all dressed up and we've got our microphones and we're thinking, we're so going to get the answer here. What is computational thinking? So we can move ahead with her, right? And so we asked her pretty much flat out, what is computational thinking? And her response was, well, we don't know, that's what we're paying you to find out. Okay? Now, there are two ways to look at that. One is, uh-oh. Nobody has any idea. We're really up the creek here. And the other way to look at it is, that's like a gold badge. We can trailblaze now. We can take the reins of this and figure out what makes sense. Given all of our different diverse backgrounds, we've got industry and government and education and private contractors and just all kinds of folks in the room that can put their input into it. And then we've got our PIs that are guarding the purity of computer science so that they can help us to make sure that we don't go off the deep end in some way or another. Okay? And again, if everybody gets upset at each other because these discussions are hard sometimes, I'm the one who helps them with that because I'm a psychologist. Okay, very handy stuff actually. All right, so that's strategic planning. And then the second thing is what we call our deliverables management tool. And once we've done the strategic planning, this helps us, okay, you can't see the whole thing, but this helps us to have documentation of who's responsible for what the timeline is and all of that. And we have a regular review of this, just about a monthly basis. We go through and review this. And so it has the deliverables derived from our strategic plan. So these are the actionable items. There are actually 18 of them. Okay, and this is just a little kind of snapshot of it. Then you have who's from the executive committee, who's in charge of it, and who is on the task committee. We have ExecCom, TaskCom, and AdCom. So that's the executive committee, the task committee, and the advisory committee. So we just call them that because they sound cool, nobody's otherwise. And then as these things get done, they turn different colors. So we have a red behind, we have a yellow borderline, and we have a green done or on time or on target or whatever the case may be. So this is just another thing that helps us with that. Very useful. And then we have a timeline piece that we developed. And this is, we made this into posters, and every place that this group meets, we have a copy of this poster up on the wall. Okay, so it shows what's due when and where everybody's supposed to be. And seriously, I have found that this particular item is probably our most valuable piece of paper because everybody understands it. Everybody gets it. And that's one of the things that's really hard to get straight with a project like this, especially over a span of 3 years, is where are we, where are we supposed to be, what's going on, you know, and all of that. And this just makes it really nice and easy and visual, and all the good stuff is on one sheet of paper. And then there are posters. And I wander into the meetings and I see people standing there looking at the poster. Now, these are people that have been doing this for 2 years. And they're looking at the poster going, okay, well, yeah, all right, I'm on track. You know, because they've got all their responsibilities for what they trade. So I really recommend something like this if you're doing this kind of a project. Yes? Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to show you our wiki, which you can get into, I believe, any time that you want, but I also have a bunch of cards, so if you have an interest, just make sure you get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that you can get anything that's on this today. You can get it, including our media archive. Yes. Yes. Those are the URLs for it. So this is up on our wiki, and we really tried hard to make all of that stuff available to everybody. Partly because, frankly, our business partners, that's how they operate. They don't have a concept of stuff sitting on your hard drive on your computer. Everything's shared. So they keep saying, well, how about Google Docs? How about live meeting? How about this? How about that? You know, all of that kind of stuff. And I've found that the wiki works the best for me. Did you have questions?
Well, the same question. When these tools are available for us to use.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that, you know, that's one of the things I like best about the community college system is that we all share. Yeah, we're just like, yeah, you know, if it helps me, it might help you. Hope it does. And by the way, I can be contacted via email or phone or anything about any of this also if you yes. You know, I don't know the answer to that. Remember, I'm a psychologist, so I'm kind of fuzzy me. But I think if you have a Google account, you can get into it because I think that's how it operates. But you know. Oh, okay. Great. So you're good to go. All right. So a couple other things. Teaching moments and individual research that people have been doing. The computer science guys really got into this. Once we got started, it's like, why don't we know more about this? Why is this not part of our parlance? Those kinds of questions. And I'll show you some of those here in a minute. Middle school and high school, interdisciplinary, higher ed teachers, this group of folks is very diverse. But one of the things that we like is this Project Lead the Way for our K-12 colleagues. And the nice thing about Project Lead the Way is an engineering elective that you take in middle school and high school. And the nice thing about it is it's an elective. So it doesn't have all these frameworks and standards and everything and have the whole curriculum locked down. These folks can do whatever the heck they want. And that's what we need. You know, we need a place where we can go in and do these things without threatening people's jobs because they're off the administratively approved rails. Does that make sense? So this is very important. If you're going to work with K-12 folks, you've got to find a way to work with them without them having to defend the standards-based elements of those things. Because they, A, don't have time, and B, the stuff is so complicated and so locked down and so decided elsewhere that they just don't have power to do that. So this is very empowering to find these folks, the Project Lead the Way folks.
And what exactly is done with these folks? Do you train them?
Actually, we have our training workshop coming up on the 21st of this month. We pay for their subs, bring them all in. They're there for the day. We have our PIs and some psychologist guy and a bunch of other people who will be doing training elements for them. Plus, we sent them out some things ahead of time, which I'm going to show you here in just a moment. Okay. Templates and lesson plans, we borrowed some of those, we created our own in some cases and so forth. That continues to develop. But the main thing is you want to put some things out there and say, okay, try this out in your classroom, see if this works. And we have them in biology classrooms, we have them in art classrooms, we have them in math classrooms, we have them in engineering, obviously. It's not all computer science classrooms. And of course, we have a lot of voice going on. But we have different modules, and again, you can access these because they're on the wiki, and you can see kind of what they're like. And some are still in development, but you can see what's going on there. And we've pre-piloted almost all of these. And the students really like them. And what's more important is that the instructors like them. That's fun for them to do something like that. Okay, and then this kind of gets to what I'm talking about here. So we do filming and taping and all kinds of document storage possibilities that we've done. I'll show you some of this stuff here in a minute. And then this is the one that I like the best, is that we have a media server capability. So anything that we film in our studio is available. And it's available for all of you too. In fact, you don't need any kind of password to get to that. That I know for sure because I tried it out. And then we're also working, Sac State has a senior project thing that everybody does in the computer science area, and we have a team that's working on a web presence for us. We've had a web presence for a while, but it's kind of more of a blog really than anything else. But they're working on a full-blown tri-portal web presence for us. And the different portals are for the general public, for people that are more interested, like other CPAP people and so forth. And then the third one is just our sandbox, where we can go in and play and make a mess, and hopefully something good comes out of it. Not my stuff. My stuff's usually just pretty messy. But and then conference presentations and things like that, like we're doing today. So those are some of the things that we do for dissemination. Now, this is a good part. Okay, the tools for communication. One of them is our blog, and we started the blog actually with our very first CPAP grant. And so it has seriously hundreds and hundreds of links and documents and material that's just, I mean, it's like drinking water out of the fire hose, really. But if you're interested in what's going on with this project, everything is here from day one. And I seriously mean day one, agendas and the whole bit. So one of the things that moved us from CPAP 1 to CPAP 2 with the NSF is that apparently nobody else had done this that they knew of to document their project. So they can literally log on here and see all of our documentation in one place. And for me, and I've done lots and lots of grant programs before, this is the first one that I felt like was really organized. It's like a bulletproof organization. So when we're doing our elevator pitch with people out there in the community and so forth, one of the things we say is, hey, if you want to see everything, go to the blog. And there are people that are crazy enough to want to do that. And they'll say, well, I noticed that when you start off, you get that all that lot. It's literally, they've read almost the whole thing. You know, thinking, what? But the nice thing about a blog is that you can get input from other people out there. You can put stuff up, post things pretty easily, links and documents and all of that stuff. Lots and lots of possibilities all within one thing. And it's in reverse chronological order. So if you're not interested in prehistoric stuff, you can just start at the top and work down until your interest wanes, or if you get that sleep that you've been looking for. So anyway, that's the blog part of it. I didn't want to do that. Stop. Okay. There we go. All right. So that's the blog part of it. The second thing is our wiki, and this is the one that I really recommend. Wikis, of course, have different levels and so forth, but what I have up here is, and this is going on the web right now, so we'll see how it goes with picking this stuff up. There we go. Okay. So this is what the wiki looks like. The wiki is, it's really not designed to be beautiful. And certainly this one isn't, but it does have, for example, our computational thinking definitions that we've been working with. So if you're interested in that, that's all there. Okay? Then we get reactions from people about that. They can upload things to the wiki. And then the questions that we ask are things like, why should we care, and what are the components of computational thinking? Just things that we think that when you open a conversation like I did with my neighbor who's a construction guy the other day about computational thinking, what would he ask? And we had about a 45-minute conversation about this. It was really interesting. It's almost like evangelizing your faith or something like that, you know. But there is a kind of a religious element to computational thinking. I guess you have to accept some of it on faith. And then here, what you can see going on is that we have lots and lots and lots of links to documents that you can download. See how many of these things there are? There's a lot of them. And what I like about the wiki is you decide what you want to put up on there, and it takes 2 seconds. It's not like all this other stuff where you got to go in and get all these permissions. You log on as the owner of the wiki or one of the owners of the wiki, and you can upload stuff just so fast. It really works well. And you can see, you know, there's quite a bit of stuff there. But if you look at, for example, in this case, parallelism, that's one of our teaching moments. So if you're interested in parallelism as a component of computational thinking, there it is. You can go right there and look at that thing. So anyway, this is probably the most useful one here. It's not the most fun one. I think the next one is the most fun one, and that's the media archive. And we've done a couple of other things with this. And again, this is not password protected or anything. And it's on your sheet there. You can go in here, and this is some other stuff that doesn't relate to CPAP, but you can see, like, we did a Veterans Day thing and we recorded it. It's just our culture at Folsom Lake College that when we do something that's any kind of event or important thing that we want to document, we hook up the cameras. We get people in there, and we make a video of it so that we have those archives. And one thing I got to tell you as a dean is it really impresses my president. Okay? Because not everybody can be at everything. And you say, hey, it's up there, everybody can look at it anytime they want. It's like, yeah. You know, she really gets into that. So that's a lot of fun. So if we go here to the CPAP2, and of course you can look at any of these that you want. We also have a password protected archive where we record, for example, classes where the instructors don't want their material to be widely used. They want to focus on their classroom for that. So there are some things like that, but you just won't see those. Here's an example. Yeah. Here's an example of some people are doing. I don't think anybody's done this.
Everyone should have it chin done. The rest of the parts going to make sure you're signed in. Didn't have one.
Okay, now,
then we'll get started.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think this hasn't been done too much, but we actually record all of our meetings. So when we go to NSF and we say we're doing blah, 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 and they say, give us your documentation, we say, well, here, you want to watch the meeting? Never get a question about that. All right? Because they can tell what's going on here. We actually re-outfitted this entire room with all of our best technology, and we use it for meetings like this, where we can do a video teleconference, we can record it, we have wireless presenting, none of this stuff. Okay? Just go in there with your laptop, log on, you're good to go, you're on the screen. Instead of having a projector and a screen like this, we have a giant flat screen monitor with really good resolution. Just a bunch of stuff like that you can actually make kind of an impact with. And it gives you the opportunity to record. So you can go back, if you're not there, you can go back to the media archive and look at it, and, you know, well, I had to miss that meeting, I was out of town on business, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So that's one thing that I think is really kind of fun. Then, down to about 5 minutes. Okay. I really want to show you this.
Have you ever tried to bake a cake or make some sort of fancy dish for dinner that was complicated and you never made it before and you wanted it to turn out really well? Well, chances are you have, and if you did, you used a recipe and you followed that recipe, and if it was a good recipe and you followed it correctly, then you made some spectacular dish to eat. Well, if you did that, you were actually using what's known as an algorithm. And it turns out that algorithms are fundamental to computational thinking and to computer science. And so that's what we're going to talk about.
This is one of our PIs. He's one from Sacramento.
So this concept of algorithm,
and he did
teaching a set of steps that does one particular task.
Computational
follow the steps
that we identified.
For it to be an algorithm, each step must be a single clear task.
Part of what we're doing with these is
formulating a solution to a problem as an algorithm. Then what you have just done is helped to automate the solution of the problem. That's why it's so interesting to study algorithms, what you're talking about.
It took a lot to put these together.
Some of the science concepts involved in studying algorithms, well, obviously programming. So, you know, he's coding algorithms.
It's really interesting to see how that develops. Also,
we also analyze
if you're,
algorithms to see which algorithms are better to use, because sometimes there's more than one way to achieve a
Stop. Okay. So if you're interested in doing documentation, doing training, you know, that kind of stuff, most of our campuses have somebody who does this. They have a studio or they have a production class or, you know, something like that. And it's good quality. It's something you can sit and look at. You're not distracted by the fact that it's all pixelated and you can't get the audio right, you know, and all that kind of stuff. We have engineers that do that. Just not everybody does. You just have to find them and start using this resource that's out there. And when you think about it, you know, these guys are all about trying to make learning interesting for kids. So they're as interested in watching a video rather than reading a document as their students are. So we decided we had to have something that they would do. These are 20 minutes max in length. They can watch it anytime on any device that they have. I saw one watching one on his iPhone the other day. You know, and it's just another approach, but it's a way of kind of getting at that piece that we're always looking for.
You transcribe in your music and try to suppose they transcribe, but if you transcribe, you don't worry about that because you're going to do it enough.
We have not done any transcription so far, but we do have in every one of our meetings, in trainings and so forth, we do have a person in there taking notes. So it's not the same thing transcribed. It's a different view of it, which we kind of think is important. Because it helps us identify things that may not just jump right out on the video. And she's also paid separately for doing this above her job as my assistant, because she's really good at that. Okay, we got one more minute for questions. Yes.
Okay, I'm not a psychologist. So. We might be trying to get my head around all these ways of thinking. I took critical thinking, system thinking, and now we have this computational thinking. Mm-hmm. Is there a hierarchy to this that I should be reviewing, or is it all circular, or is it all embedded?
Yeah, well, I can only give you a psychologist's answer to that. But what I would say from the standpoint of teaching and learning, and from the standpoint of adapting and there's an adaptation process for our students, adapting from learning to doing. I think a big part of it, of the answer to that question, is it an academic process or is it a doing process? And the answer for us has been it has to be both. It has to be both. So, and whether you call it computational thinking or critical thinking or whatever, as long as students are able to access those tools and actually use them to make a difference, like, you know, you can stand in front of any classroom and say, okay, we've been talking about something that's going to generate a lot of data here. How would you use computers to help with that? Or how does thinking about how we communicate now using all these devices, okay? How does that work out when we start going from just thinking about it to now I'm in the workplace? And do I say in the interview I'm an iPhone expert? Or don't? You know, those are all kinds of questions that sort of revolve around this. And I think the idea is that we want to give students another set of tools to use. And my kids now understand abstraction, and they understand algorithms and things like that. And not because they watch numbers on TV, but because we talk about it. And just even having that as part of their parlance, I think, is a good thing. You know, because they're not intimidated by those kinds of terms anymore. Well, I think we're out of time, right? Are we out of time? Are we totally out of time? Okay, all right.
I'd like to take this time to thank Barry on behalf of everything.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. And thank you all for coming today. By the way, I want to make sure you all get cards if you want. And really feel free to contact